This is the moment. Well, these are the two moments. This and this. This is when I realised at 76 minutes that this is a problem. And it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like a beautiful problem. But actually, I think if you look a little bit deeper, there's a subplot at play here that could hurt Man City as the season progresses. Welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. I hope you guys are doing wonderfully well. Man City have drawn 3-3 against Tottenham in a farcical Sunday of Barclays. It's been great stuff. So what did we actually learn from this chaotic game of football? Well, we learned some positives and some negatives from both teams. And I want to start off with Man City and focus on what I'm talking about here, because there is a discussion point over complacency when it comes to Man City. And it was in the 76th minute that I thought, this is a thing. This could well be a thing. And it's incredibly a first world problem, especially if you're Tottenham with the injuries that they've had. And I want to talk about Tottenham. I want to talk about a bit of a kryptonite for them, certainly with this team, with the personnel that you have right now, but also the positives of how you got yourself a point in this game, which feels outrageous when you look at the expected goals and the chances that Man City had. But Tottenham hung in there and got themselves a point. And there are a couple of cracks here when it comes to Man City. I think it's a mental thing more than anything else. There's still a lot of brilliance in this team. But as I say, this was something that I thought was really, really interesting in terms of the possible problems in terms of figuring out Man City, and something that actually Pep has been very against. So Jeremy Doku is... guy's a cheat code. He's an utter cheat code right now. And stopping him is very, very difficult. But I wonder if there's an element of social loafing that's going on with the brilliance of Jeremy Doku. Now, let me show you the average positions, because I think the average positions are really, really important to show here with this game. Because Jeremy Doku was, again, really, really effective in this game. He hits the bar. He could have, he created, obviously, the second goal. We'll show you a screenshot from that. And you can see him here, very high up. And if you think of his heat map, he gets on the ball and he runs at the fullback. That's what he does. But what's really interesting when it comes to these average positions is the positioning of Kyle Walker and Phil Foden. And I tweeted about this. I said that, isn't it crazy that you've got a team that's that good that you can essentially turn Phil Foden into a little bit of a decoy? And certainly in the last two games against teams that have been looking to press you, like Tottenham, like Liverpool, they have been doing something very, very clever here, which is building up on this side of the pitch as much as possible, especially against teams that are going to press you. And then it leaves this massive amount of space for someone like Jeremy Doku to stay wide, get on the ball, and then when it comes to it, he's got a one-on-one duel and a lot of space to work with. And that's what they did in the first half, and they sort of tore them to shreds at times. Again, they sort of hung in there, and we can talk about the three goals, of course, for Tottenham in this one. But in terms of Doku and his brilliance, that was a big part of it. Him, as ever, staying nice and wide, staying out of it, and actually the ball working its way up on this side and then making its way off into Silva or Alvarez, at times, and getting the ball to Doku in those one-on-one situations. And let me show you a couple of examples of it, because when you then see Jack Grealish in this position, there's a bit of a problem, okay? So let's make our way through it. So this is what we saw time and time again. We saw, and actually it was Doku and Bernardo Silva often in the other way around a lot of the time, but a lot of bodies actually in the right half of the pitch, right? So if we move it on one more, it was to get that space again to give Jeremy Doku the chance. But what I find a little bit funny about this is, of course, you're going to take Jeremy Doku. Why wouldn't you? But it kind of goes against the sort of anti-individualism, to a point, that Pep Guardiola often kind of thinks about, when it's about that, that beautiful movement that we've seen with, not playing with the striker and all that stuff. You kind of have so much movement that I come out of this space, you go into that space, and that's how you hurt the opposition. But with Jeremy Doku in the side, he's a little bit too good to do that, right? So if we move it on, here's a good example of that build-up. You can see Bernardo Silva on the ball here, and they work their way up the pitch. If we have a look at the time, it's 30 minutes and 2 seconds. If we move it on one more, what you'll see is that here we are, Jeremy Doku, and you've got all these players kind of away from him, no one else, and he's got that run against Pedro Porro, and he's got that opportunity to do what he does, be it this way or that way, and looking to get that cross in. Now, what that does for the opposition, I think, a little bit is, at least it's a little bit more predictable, and there was a lot of talk about Trent last week. But at the same time, if it's a one-on-one duel, that's good odds for someone like Jeremy Doku because he is that fantastic. This is the best example of it. You're not going to believe this when you see it now that we've kind of spoken about what we've spoken about. Here, this is the second goal. And what's really important to remember is that once he does get the ball, 1, 2, and I think certainly, maybe not Ben Davies because Alvarez comes, but 3 of them, at the very least, are literally frozen because they're so scared of Jeremy Doku by this point. But for him, someone as dangerous as that, to have that kind of space, is pretty outrageous. And it was fantastic from Man City. But you've got all these players over on this side. And again, beautiful work. Second subplot of this in terms of what we learned. The reason why Alvarez stays in the team, when there's probably other options that you could have, is that composure that he has in the box. And actually his delivery as well for the first goal is absolutely fantastic. But his understanding and composure in the box, it's one of those where I think Pep Guardiola is kind of allowing for the other elements of his play, which is good, very good, but as someone who's kind of not outrageously fast, he's just a very smart striker. He's got a little bit of a Teddy Sheringham vibe to him, obviously with a little bit more pace, but he obviously makes that beautiful run in there. Ben Davies goes with him. Should they have a better line than that? I mean, when you've got 2 fullbacks playing as your back 4, you're going to start making mistakes. But it all comes from Jeremy Doku being absolutely frightening, but also, importantly, having so much space to do what he wants to do. So this is why this matters to me, because when Jack Grealish came on, I think if you know we're Man City, we are so repped in passing and passing and passing and passing and passing and passing, passing, and building up and moving up through the thirds. But when you know that kind of a lot of the roads often look to lead to Jeremy Doku over on that left-hand side, and then go on, Jeremy, make it rain. When you take him out of it, I think the change in sort of mindset for the team is one that they're going to have to work on and get better at, because it is so different. And this screenshot for me really proves that, because when you've got Jack Grealish on the ball, he 9 times out of 10 is going to want to do that. He's going to want to go inside. And so that makes it about Gvardiol. And from a mental standpoint, Porro's not bothered about Gvardiol over Jeremy Doku. And again, in a different game, you have Jeremy Doku here, driving at the byline or inside. And it's much more awkward and difficult thing to do when you're Tottenham and you're trying to be compact. So in terms of being able to bring on Jack Grealish, as opposed to the other way around. Now, if you're playing the other way around and you've got Bernardo Silva and Grealish working together, and they both can play as wingers, and the movement's fantastic and all of that stuff, then that's one thing when you make that change and go, okay, get it to Doku now. But I think the other way around is a bit of a problem. And as I say, the way that Pep has played previously, and again, we did a video recently talking about the change in his beliefs. This kind of is another one of those, because the individualism of relying on someone like Jeremy Doku, and again, is he just focusing on it right now and there will be a change when we get to March? Who will be in that starting 11 come March? I mean, it might be one where you change it around and you have Grealish to start with, and then you work to allow that width later in the game when it gets a little bit tired. But I thought Tottenham, that's what gave Tottenham a little bit more life, was the opportunity of being able to be a little bit more compact, because they wanted to win the ball in central areas a lot of the time. But at the end of the day, when you're Tottenham and you want to be compact like this, to be able to not have to go over to that left-hand side, you're not getting stretched as much. And I think that's why Tottenham were able to get themselves a draw in this game. So let's talk about weaknesses for Tottenham. And I think the big one for me, it really was glaring how much they missed someone like James Maddison. Now, Lo Celso, again, another goal scorer like Grealish, and neither of them played badly. And also, of course, Grealish was through on goal, which that was pretty farcical that he blew the whistle. I couldn't believe it. And I can imagine Man City fans being fuming about that, rightly so, especially at the end of the game when you've kind of already played advantage. That was really, really odd. But one thing that Pep Guardiola did get right was a narrow press against Tottenham. Now, this is something that I think Wolves have done really, really well against Tottenham, and Aston Villa have done really, really well against Tottenham as well. And Man City did it as well to great effect. And they basically said, you can have it, Davies, and Royale, you can have the ball as well. Because what they did was they became very, very narrow. Doku, Silva, Haaland, Alvarez and Thogden all stepping in. And so the problem with that was that when you had someone like Udogie who wanted to come inverted and get on the ball like he often does, or the same with someone like Porro, they weren't able to do that. And they weren't able to play through and get that overload through the middle. And what they did, again, as I say, is they went, do you know what? You have the ball, Davies. You have the ball, Royale. Because ultimately, I don't think you've, one, got in your locker to play that ball to Johnson. And even with a high line, actually, which is what they did as well, they really did sort of tempt them into doing it. Kulusevski tried to get on the ball in these sort of areas here a lot of the time, but was unable to get on the ball because it was so congested by this point. Lo Celso, I was a little bit disappointed with, I'll be honest. I thought he dropped deep far too often. And when he dropped deep, he then ended up playing the ball backwards a lot, and that just meant the same thing. Brian Hill, what I thought was, he worked very hard, but ultimately he's redundant, especially against someone like Kyle Walker. I think there was a moment when it was sort of half through, but it was literally like a child versus a man, if we're honest. And look, this is the thing, how many of these players are actually starting if all is well? So it's about getting through it. And so again, you have to give those plaudits to Tottenham ultimately when it comes to the result. But what I thought Man City did really, really well was that narrow press. Let me show you exactly what I mean, because there were several moments when they made life very difficult for them. And if you think of that Basuma goal, which we can show you, again, it comes from that narrow press. So here's a great example. Thogden matching up with Udogie. You've got Doku looking to stop the passes in and looking to press as well. You got Bernardo Silva being the starting point for it as well. Even someone like Rodri really, really high up on Basuma as well. Alvarez ready to go and make that press. And so for Tottenham, who ideally would like to play the ball through, this was one of several options where really, look, if you can play that pass and you've got, the ability to do it, fine. But I think Man City were quite happy for them to look to play that pass. Otherwise, you're going to have to play the ball to Emerson Royale. And actually, I think you can see it with Heung-min Son's body language, is that Lo Celso, for all the good that he did, obviously, with the goal, and he has got a goal in him when he gets it, that comes from Tottenham being able to bait Man City, or actually it was a bad pass from Man City, and the ball gets to Lo Celso, and he just has the ball for the first time in zone 14, which prior to that, I thought he really, really struggled with it, and we can show you some more examples of that. You'll see it right now. If we move it along, this is another example. I think Lo Celso, very deep here, and actually, more importantly, the press from Man City. Look how narrow it is, just looking to stop them. Because, again, this will be something that I think Roy Keane was talking about it, this sort of frustration of like, well, it's not there to go through. But that's kind of what Tottenham want to do. They want to play through the middle. And so Man City had the answer for them and kind of called their bluff a little bit. Move it along one more. This is a good example of Lo Celso and his inability to play in these areas. For me, I thought he could have been a lot higher up the pitch, but I think actually it came down to how poor Basuma was in this one, because he really struggled to get on the ball. The press was so strong that he wasn't able to play through the lines. But Lo Celso as well, constantly for me, playing the ball backwards. And I get it, but James Maddison wouldn't have done that. He would have got the ball and would have progressed it, or he would have played those long passes. That passing range that he has is on another level to Lo Celso. And so in this instant, you got someone like Heung-min Son dropping this deep to get on the ball, and that's not what you want. You want him as high up the pitch as possible to give himself a chance. And so that, again, was another moment where you've got Man City looking to press, get involved at all times. We can show you another one. Actually, one of the goals, the Basuma goal, the third goal for Man City, comes from exactly that. Looking to play through the middle, Basuma having a very poor game by his standards and an inability to get through that narrow press from Man City. So that is something that I think we learned that other teams will look to do as well, I think, at times. And again, Lo Celso, you can see from the body language of the opposition, he gets the ball here. Like, why isn't he here? He doesn't need to be there. If Basuma was getting on the ball in a different position or owning the game a little bit more, then he might be able to play the ball to Porro here. And as I say, Lo Celso should be a lot higher up the pitch. So that's something for them to work on. But again, was it down to that clever press from the likes of Man City? Maybe. Like, two things can be true. That's often the case. But I thought Lo Celso, for all his moments of good work, and I think he was struggling alongside someone like Basuma, who really, really struggled throughout this game, that was enforced upon them by the good press from Man City. But it is a weakness in this Tottenham side. Let's finish with a positive for Tottenham, because that first goal and the Kulusevski goal in particular, they come from the philosophy of Ange Postecoglou and what he wants them to do. And he spoke about it at half-time himself. And if you think of that break at the end for the first goal, it's one where Vicario is positive in what he does. Bryan Hill looks to find, I think it's Kulusevski or whoever it may be, and I think it's Porro who makes that run, and Heung-min Son make that run as well. Doku gets absolutely burnt, by the way. But it comes from the endeavour. The endeavour will get Tottenham 10, 15 goals this season. And the same comes for the Kulusevski one. You can look at it on the other side and go, both those goals are unacceptable. The second goal is utterly unacceptable as well. The amount of space that is there from Man City. And time and again for me, when it comes to Man City, my problem is this area of the pitch. They are constantly being caught out in this area of the pitch. Be it in a transitional moment, which comes from there, obviously, but also that second goal comes from here. Third goal, Kulusevski bullying Ake. I think it's one where you go, it's 6-1, half a dozen of the other, where Ake, should he be stronger there? He's literally been brought on to stop this now, but Kulusevski wants it. And again, that comes back from the philosophy. He says himself, Kulusevski, don't think about it, just do it. Have that bravery. This Tottenham side has absolutely no right to get a point against Man City. And that says two things for me. One, there is sort of knock-on effects of complacency that are occurring to this Man City side right now. Will it be something that they work through? I imagine they would. You would expect them to. But it is there. And as I say, that individualism is interesting. Ronaldinho, comply or you're out. And he kind of went, right? Ibrahimovic, too individualistic. Grealish comes for 100 million. It gets beaten out of him a little bit. Jeremy Doku, there's a cheat code there. It's available to him and it allows him to stretch the pitch. But the problem is, bizarrely, when he's not on the pitch, this whole team has to kind of re-engage a different element of their mind. And that is a bit of a problem.